going to talk about truss rods a little bit today. Truss rods are a little bit of a mysterious thing for a lot of people because you guys don't normally get to see them. I see them a lot. I've installed them, messed with them, and that sort of thing. So we got four kinds of truss rods we're going to look at today. First one is this one. This is a square tube. It's a passive truss rod. Okay, so your T-bar, any kind of carbon fiber. I've got carbon fiber too, but anyways, basically this is a passive truss rod. All it does is resist the pull of the strings. It's got no adjustment anyway at all. Passive. Just resist the pull of the strings based upon the strength of the thing. And these square tubes are pretty good. You know, this is out of the 70s Martin, and they're pretty good. The problems that occur with them are generally when they're not glued in and they slip. They've got to be glued in really, really tight. Here, and here's a neck with a truss rod channel, so you can see how it fits in here. It'd fit right up here on the end, and you'd put a strip right there. They've got to be epoxied or whatever glue you're going to use. They've got to be in there really solid, and sometimes that glue will slip. So you can see that if the glue slips, you know, the neck's just going to move. But this is how they fit in. Here's an actual 1970s neck with one in it. Now, one thing about this is you notice the difference between the old neck, the 70s neck, and a modern neck. The modern neck, Martin will route it out like this, and it leaves a space right up here, and that's kind of a weak spot. I have had necks crack right here, and I've filled in necks with mahogany to try to strengthen that. But look at the difference between the 70s and the modern one. This has got more wood in it right here, and I just can't help but think that's going to make a little bit of a stronger bond right there. Anyway, that's a passive rod, sorry. Next kind that you're going to run across is a Martin single action truss rod. And I'm going to take all these rods over here to the vise in a little bit and show you how they actually work. But this is a single action. It's got one rod right here. It runs in an aluminum channel with a metal rod. The tape in here is designed to keep the rod from vibrating against the metal sides. And obviously, if this thing gets to vibrating, you're going to have a little metal rattle in there, which is really super irritating. Personally, when I install these rods, if I ever do, which I don't very often, I push silicone in there. I put a lot of silicone in there, and more than just the tape, to really try to stop that thing from vibrating. And this would fit in this same size channel, just like that. And see, if it comes up right here, if you push it in too far, it starts coming up. So it has to sit back about right there, and it leaves a cavity right here, which I don't really like, you know. And it sticks out like this. Okay? Here's one in the neck. There's one already in the neck, and this is what they look like. Sticks out about that much so that it goes through the neck block, and you can access the nut with a wrench from there, because you know the neck block is going to go right here, and so the truss rod sits right there. This is one inside the neck, and right up in here you can see where that cavity would be. Sometimes, you know, I'll open that up right there and inject epoxy or super glue or something like that up in there to try to anchor that a little bit more. Strengthen it up some, I don't know. This is a different kind of single action rod. This is made by Luthier's Mercantile. This is my personal favorite rod. If I'm doing a neck, I generally use these. And what I do then is lay carbon fiber alongside of it. So you can see that in this channel, it's going to go like this. And you can see it's not going to fit. There's going to be a lot of room on the side. And so what I do is put carbon fiber strips alongside this right here to make the neck naturally stiff. And then this truss rod just simply adjusts the relief out of it. The reason I like these is just because of the simplicity. There's no metal. There's not in a metal channel like this one is. So they don't vibrate on the sides. And I'll still fill this up pretty good with silicone here to make sure there's no vibrations going on. But these are just such a simple, strong rod. They're welded here at the tip, and then this is the adjustment over here. And again, I'm going to put these in the vise over there. You'll see what they look like, how they work. This is a double action rod. You got a nut. You got two threaded sections here. You got threads over here, and you got threads over here. Modern Martins use these, and a lot of manufacturers use double action. This one's really long. Golly, I'm not sure what this is supposed to be for, but somebody gave me this one. You know, I didn't buy it. That's way too long. It must be for. Man, I don't even know. That's too long. Should be about it right there. But maybe that's why they gave it to me. So we're going to go stick these in the vise and we'll see how they work. So these three, the double action, this single action, these are all active truss rods. This one here is a passive truss rod. The square tube is a passive. Now the double action and the single action will act differently on the neck. I'll talk about that a little bit more probably, but the double action to me seems like it pulls the neck. And when you adjust these, you will see less changes in the relief and a lot of change in the action. And I've also seen these absolutely take the action at the nut and flatten it. So if you have a good action at the nut looks right, and you crank this double action truss rod down, the nut will just go, the action at the nut will just go shrink down to nothing. I've seen guitars that had good actions at the nut, just the double action truss rod, and the strings laying flat on the first fret. That doesn't happen with the single action. The single action will actually just bow the neck back and forth, and it won't change the action at the nut so much. We'll see some of this when we go over to the vise. So let's go do that. Move over to the vise here and watch these truss rods work. Here's our passive truss rod. It's in the vise, and here's a straight edge on it. And it is bent. Flip it over. Let's put it this way. I might have bent this, I don't know, messing with it. Might have been over time, it's hard to tell. Anyway, let's put the straight edge on it again. And still got a little hump in it here somewhere. You know what, that doesn't really matter though when it's in the neck, as long as you bend the neck back a little bit and glue it. So remember, here's our neck. And what you would do is pre-stress this neck. You put it in a caul or something, and you could bend this neck back just a little bit, glue the truss rod in it, nice and solid, and you would have a pre-stressed neck, so that when it was not strung up, you would have about 10/1000ths of an inch proud over here, so you'd have a built-in curve. When the strings come up, it'll resist it. So let's see how strong this is. I'm going to clamp it up a little bit better here. You know, it moves. There's a straight edge on it. I'm going to move it back. And so I can pull it down pretty easy. Pretty easy. They're not all that strong. I mean, they're pretty strong, but you can bend it. Of course, your string tension doesn't really pull this way. Your string tension pulls this direction. So it's more like you need to pull this way. You've got about that much of an angle to it. So you're really not, I don't know, you'd have to calculate how much actual upwards tension. Not that much. So over here, in other words, I'm putting 150 pounds of tension. I'm putting my body weight on this end of the string of the rod. That's not the way it works on a guitar. On a guitar, your torque is going this way more, with the shallow angle of whatever your action happens to be. So it's really more like this. And these are pretty good rods, really. They're just non-adjustable. So, okay, here's a Martin single action rod, and we're going to put this in. I'm going to do it both ways so you can see how this rod actually works. Now what happens is when you tighten this, it's going to make the rod shorter, right? Because you're screwing this in, As this gets shorter, it's going to make this part bow upwards. So let's put it in here. It's upside down right now, but that's okay. I want you to see how this works over here. And this takes a 5mm wrench. Right now the rod, it's loose. See, the nut is totally loose, and there's a washer on the end here that's important for these kind of rods. It's got to have a nice firm surface to push against. So put your truss rod wrench in here. Let me show you one other thing about this. A lot of people talk about running out of threads. You've got a lot of threads right here. You've got a good 1/2 inch of threads. And you might think, oh, 1/2 inch, that's not much. Yeah, but it doesn't take much to bend these rods. Okay, so I'm going to clamp it in there. And as you tighten it, watch this rod in the middle now. There it goes, see that? See, the rod's getting shorter, so it's bending the aluminum channel. This will pop right out of there. And if I turn it over now, you can see the definite bow in the truss rod. So here's my straight edge. And that's a lot of bow. I mean, look at that. That is a lot of bow. And you've barely touched those rods. I mean, you saw me adjust it. Let's do it this way so you can see the rod move. I really don't have this very tight at all. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to loosen it. I got like one full turn. And that nut's loose. That nut's loose. Here's how much relief it has in it. Nut's loose. And this is how much curve is in it. Of course, it's not going to straighten all the way back because it's got a little bit of a pre-curve in it, but this is what you're looking at right here. A little bit. And like I said, it's just taking a set, so I could bend it back. Get it pretty straight. But so one full turn is all it took to put that much relief into it, or that much bend into it, to take the relief out. So here we go again. I'm going to start right here. Go around. There's half a turn. There's one turn. And you got tons of threads left in there. Look at that. Now, watch how this bends. It doesn't bend perfectly even here. You know, you can see that it's bending right here, but it's not doing anything out here on the ends or over here. Your curve is right here in the middle, maybe a little bit more forward even. So this kind of truss rod doesn't adjust like that. It adjusts more almost in a V. You know, if I was to really crank it, the stress point would be right here in the middle. And think about that in terms of a guitar neck, you see. Okay? That's what that looks like. Let's get the Luthier's Mercantile in here. Like I said, every one of these truss rods has got a characteristic. And when it's in the neck, it will have a certain characteristic as to how it affects the neck relief. The double actions tend to flatten the neck relief over the whole neck. The single actions tend to focus it more in the middle of the neck. So here's your Luthier's Mercantile rod. It's just a simple, it's the same principle, but it's just a simple metal strip going up here, welded at the end, and a nut. I'm going to put it in upside down again. I got to clamp this one right on the this piece. There we go. And it takes 3/16. 9/64. Takes a 9/64 out of it. This is half the problem with these truss rods, is figuring out which nut it takes when you. So I'm going to dust this one. Start tightening it, and you can see it works the same way. Shortens the thread, makes this bow. You can put quite a bit of bow in there. And that's what that one looks like. And that's obviously, you know, you can see that one for sure. This one, I think, tends to have a more gradual curve than the Martin rod. You can see that it's, the gap goes almost clear to the ends very, very evenly. And maybe that's why I like these truss rods. They seem to be much more smoother and even curve. That's what we look like. Didn't take any. Look at all the threads I have left, you see? I mean, if you truly run out of threads, you've got another problem besides maybe your truss rod's broken, maybe, don't know. I don't know what it would take to, eat those threads up. There's the other my rod. I like these a lot. This is what I use when I'm going to make a bill or neck of some sort. Okay, now the double action rod. This is a StewMac hot rod, and once again it's got threaded on both ends. It's got shrink wrap sort of stuff over here so it doesn't vibrate. It doesn't have metal on metal. We're going to put it in here, and it's interesting. It takes, this one takes 1/4 of an inch nut driver. Okay, now the double action truss rods are funny because watch the rod and you'll see what I mean. I'm going to turn it this way and it opens up here. I'm going to turn it the other way and there's a dead spot right in here. See this? Where it's just spinning and nothing's happening. When you're adjusting this in the guitar, you will feel that. You will move this way and you feel it loosen, and then you come over here and you start hitting tension and you're like, oh man, that's as far as I'm going to go. Or you feel like the nut's loose and falling off or something. Nope, you just hit the dead spot in between the two adjustments. So I'm going to go the other way now. I'm going to go this way, and it's going to bow downwards, which is in the clamp so you can't see, but see it's bowing this way now. So I'm going to try to get this right on the tip so you can see it move. You can see the rod move both ways. You can see the rod now. Now watch it. I'm going to loosen it, turn it this way, and I brought the two rods together. I'm going to keep going, and now the other rod's going to bow. This one bows. Bring it back. Now the top rod's going to bow. Like that. That's why they call it the double action truss rod, because you can adjust, forcefully put relief into the neck, or you can forcefully take relief out of the neck. Now there's a couple things I don't like about the double action truss rod. Watch the end here. The rod wants to twist. As I turn this, the rod will want to twist. You see that? Wants to twist right here, and you've got to hold on to it. Now, does that twist the neck? I don't know. I suppose it's going to depend on I would think your neck would have enough strength to resist that, but even so, the fact is that the double action truss rod is trying to twist itself like this. The single actions don't do that, especially the Luther's mercantile rod. It's not going to want to do that. I can do this in my hand, if I can find my wrench. I can do this in my hand, if I can hold it, and it doesn't want to twist in any direction. It just wants to open up, see? The rod itself sits straight. Little bit of a twist maybe right there. Could just be this rod too. But in general, this one wants to stay straight. The double action wants to really twist. Even if I just do it with my hand, you can see it wanting to twist right here. See? So, like I said, does that try to twist the neck? I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So that's one thing I'm not real. I just don't like double action truss rods that much. Okay, let's look at something else. Okay, now you get to look at my face. Lucky you, huh? So, let's look back over these truss rods here again and think about how they act on the guitar. So this is the passive truss rod. There's no adjustment to it, and the only way that it resists string tension is by the strength of the rod. So you've got your strings on the bridge, and the strings are pulling. You can see that this is going to load the tension like this, and it's going to rely on the strength of the neck to pull against there. That's going to load this neck up, this neck, 70s Martin neck. It's going to have to be a stiff neck, a naturally stiff neck. It's going to have tension loaded on it like this to resist the string tension. I think that is going to load the neck differently than an adjustable truss rod like this one, where you're going to add tension in there, and the rod itself, even though this rod is not particularly strong and I can bend it back and forth, the screw tension is what makes the resistance. And so, in other words, the strength is not in the neck. The strength is not in the neck itself. This is a static neck. There's nothing actively resisting the string tension. Over here, you've got an active truss rod that actively resists the string tension. So it's like a spring loading it versus just having a piece of metal that has to have its own inherent strength. I really think, and then the double action, of course, can resist both ways. Two pieces of metal in here as opposed to two active pieces of metal, because there's a thread on both ends here, so these are two active pieces of metal. That's why it's called a double action truss rod, whereas this is a single action truss rod. There's only one thread in there. And I really think that these rods put a different sort of tension in the neck, and that can affect the sound of the guitar. And I'm not the only guy that thinks this. I'm whenever time I give you stuff like this, I'm a reporter in many cases. I'm giving you information that I've gotten from other guitar players, other luthiers, repairmen, that sort of thing. We've talked about truss rods before, and I ask them, what do you think of the passive versus the double action? And lots of people will agree that a passive truss rod acts differently from a single action truss rod, which acts different from a double action truss rod. And I have two Prue guitars, and one of them is in fact a passive truss rod. It's got carbon fiber in it. And of course, if you're getting the Martin Authentics, they've got the T-bar in them. That's a passive truss rod versus an active one. It's interesting. I've done this. I have converted necks from passive truss rods like this on the 70s Martin, and I've taken these out when the guitar had too much relief and it was just, it was a headache. Taken these out and installed single action truss rod with carbon fiber. Now when I add the carbon fiber, it's a little tricky because I am trying to make the neck inherently stiff enough to resist the string tension, to where the truss rod is just a little bit, just a little fine tuning on the relief. That's different from having the truss rod do a whole lot of the work. So in other words, if you were able to take and glue a nut on this one and have no wood whatsoever, so that the truss rod took the whole string, I'm pretty sure that guitar would sound different than if the neck itself was inherently stiff. But anyway, a lot of people will think that a passive rod will sound different than an active rod. And like I said, I have done this on the same guitar. Replaced the truss rod with an active truss rod and some support. And my gut feeling is that the truss rod tension, so the more tension you put on that truss rod, the brighter the guitar sounds. And the more passive the rod is, the bassier the sound is. And personally, I like bright, snappy guitars, and so I don't mind having an adjustable truss rod. And I don't mind having a very stiff neck with a little bit of a truss rod action on it. But I do think that that's the difference in the sound you hear. A passive truss rod does tend to be, I think, bassier, richer sounding, and the more tension you put on that neck via the truss rod, the brighter and crisper the sound seems to get. And you can know, you can test that a little bit by changing your truss rod tension on your guitar. Relax it just a little bit, an eighth of a turn, just a little, so that the relief doesn't change dramatically, but it'll shift the amount of tension that it puts on the guitar neck. And play with it, see what you think. So I'm positive that these different truss rods affect the relief itself in different ways. The passive rod bends as it will bend. If it has a weak spot anywhere in here, that's where it's going to want to bend. And so it's possible to get more relief down in this area of the neck or this area of the neck, especially, your neck is tapered, right? It's fatter down here and it gets thinner down here. And it's certainly possible to get too much relief in this area of the neck. It doesn't always build up in the exact center because the neck is weaker here and tends to flex up here a little bit more. And I've seen this happen to where you have more than expected amount of relief between frets 1 and 5 than you do between 5 and 9. And certainly as you get up into the heel, you don't expect much relief in this area because the heel itself is pretty stiff. But you can get a surprising more relief right here than you need to expect. That's probably just because the neck has a weak spot in it somewhere. The taper is such. You look at the Martin, pre-war Martins, look at the Authentics, like the 37 Authentic, and it's got a real fat heel. It starts off tapered right here and gets really fat right here. And those tend to be bass-rich guitars because maybe the neck shaft is stiffer here. Maybe it's the actual sound of the wood. I don't know. It's hard to actually test things sometimes. But my experience says that guitars with chunky necks tend to be bassier. They tend to be more powerful sounding. The guitars with thinner necks tend to be more snappy and troublier. So guitars with more even tapers tend to sound that way. And if you put a neck with a fatter shaft back in here, they tend to get bassier. The sound changes somehow. Anyways, so I am pretty sure that the type of truss rod affects the neck relief, the way the guitar sounds, the way the guitar responds in your hands, and all sorts of other things. Now, as I mentioned on this double action truss rod, these, in my experience, tend to pull the neck like this. So the relief doesn't change just in the center of the neck, but it changes on a much straighter arc. And I would need to put this in the vise and actually measure it, from end to end as it changes. But I'm looking at it to see if I can do that quickly. But my experience with them is I've had this happen many times. I had a certain brand of guitar that uses these double action truss rods, and the owner, the builder, likes to ship them with a lot of relief, 20 thousandths of an inch. I can't play 20 thousandths of an inch relief. The nut height, the height of the string off of the first fret will be pretty good. I get on the truss rod, crank that relief down to 8 thousandths of an inch, to where it's okay for me. And I look up there and the string will be laying flat on the first fret. And that just doesn't happen with a single action truss rod. I've adjusted single action truss rods from 25 thousandths of an inch relief down to 4 thousandths of an inch relief, and the nut will barely change. Barely. On these double actions, I'll adjust that, and the strings will be laying flat on the first fret, and the action will just plummet. And so, I don't know exactly what is going on, but I do know the double action truss rods would change the action at both ends, the nut and the saddle, or the 12th fret, the nut and the opposite end would change the action dramatically with just a small change in the relief. So they act differently. I guarantee they act differently. Alright, so that's a little primer on truss rods. And, they're not scary to adjust. The thing that I always try to do is to pre-stress the neck. So It's kind of awkward to show this without the guitar, but here's the neck. And what I do is lay it down. It's in one of my other videos, but you know, put it down like this and put a pad under the thing in the middle of the neck. Hold it down this side, push down right up here on the first fret area, not on the headstock, obviously. Push down there, and you can bend this neck, especially when it's on a guitar. Make it bend, pre-stress it, hold it down, and turn the wrench like that, and then you can feel the adjustment rather than trying to force it to bend the neck back. Pre-stress that neck, adjust the truss rod, you're good. That's especially important on mandolins. There's one hanging on the wall right there. Mandolins have really short little stiff necks, and I do not like to make the truss rod do all the work. You know, you could strip the nut that way. It's just hard on everything. The neck is going to bend. That's what you're adjusting the truss rod for, to make that neck bend. So pre-bend the neck, and then take the tension off of that truss rod. Okay? Pre-stressing the neck is so important. But again, you know, you've got so many threads on this. I don't see how you ever bottom one out unless it comes loose at this end, and then you've got a genuine bona fide truss rod problem. And I have seen that. You know, I have seen the weld break right here, so that you're basically just sucking the threaded rod out. Sometimes once I was able to reach in there and actually pull the threaded part out of the rod because the weld had broken up in here. Maybe the guy didn't pre-stress the neck, you know, maybe he was trying to make it do all the work and pop, snapped it. I don't know. I've seen this kind of weld break. In fact, I think I re-welded one of these one time. Took the fingerboard off and I thought, oh yeah, the weld just broke right here. This is a good one. You know, this is an LMI, but I've seen some cheap ones from other countries overseas and stuff where they had bad welds. And I looked at it, I said, pfft. So we just took it down to the shop there and welded it back up, popped it back in, had a working truss rod again. So I've seen all that stuff happen. The double actions, a little bit harder to break. I've never really seen a problem with these, except that if they do break, you're going to be replacing the rod. But I've never seen one. You know, they've got a lot of threads. This is all threaded, and both sides. It's a lot of thread. So, never really seen a problem with these, other than the fact that I just don't like them. Plus the weight. I don't know. I need to go weigh them. I can't say much about the weight. I better go weigh them before I say anything about that. So, all right. Truss rods.